Okay, so hi guys, welcome to our second lecture on Calculus 1, wherein we will be discussing how to combine functions to shift and to scale graphs of those functions in trigonometric functions. Okay, so basically we will perform addition, multiplication, division, and function composition, as well as finding the range of the and domain of the following functions. Okay, so let's first discuss additions, subtraction, and multiplication. Okay, so tulad ng mga numbers, pwede tayo mag-perform ng basic operations sa mga functions na yun. Uh, Madali lang naman mag-add, mag-subtract, and then mag-multiply, but the question is how do we find the domain? Okay, so if f and g are functions, then for every x that belongs to the domain of both f and g, that is, kailangan kunin natin yung intersection ng domain ni f at saka ni domain ni g. So, ito yung notation natin, d of f at saka d of g. And then, kukunin natin yung intersection. Okay? I think aware naman na kayo sa set notation, Marunong na rin kayo mag-perform ng set union, saka ng set intersection. Okay, and then we can define the following operations by the following formulas. Okay? So, we have hindi ko na mabasahin, no? F plus g of x just equal to f of x plus g of x. Okay? So, take note that on the left side, ang ibig natin sabihin dito ay addition of functions, while on the right side, we will have the addition of real numbers. Okay? Okay. Okay. When it comes to the division of functions, ganun pa rin naman yung domain. We just get the intersection of the domain of f and then the domain of g. Pero this time, we have a special condition wherein yung g of x natin must not equal to 0 because we know by now that we cannot divide anything by 0. So, meron lang tayong additional na restriction. Okay, and then we can also multiply functions by constants such as the following. So, c times f of x is just equal to c times df of x. Okay, we have the following example. So, suppose we have two functions, f of x and then g of x. So, f of x is the square root of x, and then g of x is equal to the square root of 1 minus x. So, first let us find the domain. So, we know that the domain of square root of x from our previous lectures is, ano yung domain ng square root of x? The domain of square root of x is just equal to 0 to positive infinity, or 0 to infinity, okay? And how about this one? The domain of g of x, we need to find the domain of g of x. So, we must set 1 minus x to be greater than or equal to 0. So, adding x both sides, we get x is 1 is greater than or equal to x, or x is less than or equal to 1. So, ang domain nito basically ay from negative infinity to 1. Okay, kasi kailangan less than or equal to 1. Okay, now taking the intersection of these two sets, okay, we get 0 to 1. Okay, so yan yung intersection ng dalawang set na yan. Okay? Okay, so now performing various set notation or set operations, we get the following. So, adding f of f plus g of x. Okay, so ang domain niya basically ay yung intersection ng set, and then ganun din dito sa subtraction ng f minus g and then g minus f. Okay, pare-pareho sila ng domain not until we have f divided by g. Okay, so we get here that hindi na natin sinama si 1. So, hindi kasama si 1. Bakit? Kasi when x is equal to 1, magsi-0 yung denominator natin, which is not possible. Okay, so kaya instead of using a square bracket, we use an open bracket. Okay? And then for the case of g divided by x, okay, we get the square root of 1 minus x all over x. And again, dito naman magsi-0 siya when x is equal to 0. So we exclude 0 from the domain. Pero si 1 kasama na, no? Okay? When it comes to graphing naman, usually pag nag-a-add tayo ng dalawang function, basically ina-add lang natin yung function values natin for some x in the domain. Okay? So as you can see here, we have the graph of f of x and then the graph of g of x. Both are positive. So pag in-add natin siya, such as f plus g of x, makakakuha tayo ng function that is much higher than the two graphs. Okay? So parang pinag-add lang natin siya point by point. Okay? And then same goes with this one. So ito yung example natin kanina. So we have the graph of square root of x and then the graph of the square root of y, 1 minus x. So pag kinuha natin yung sum, okay, then ito yung makukuha natin, y equals f of g. Basically, ang ipag-add lang natin, for example, sa x equals 1/5, i-add natin to, tapos ito. Okay, so ang makukuha natin na length ay, na height ay ito. Okay, so that is the graph of f plus g. And then multiplying, we get the following graph. So we get the graph of f dot g. Okay? Okay, now we discuss a special operation, which is the composite functions, or the operation of function composition, wherein nagpapasok tayo ng isang function sa loob ng isang function. Okay? So composition is another way of combining function. In this operation, the output from one function becomes the input to a second function. Okay, so how does this work and how do we write this? So suppose that we have two functions, f and g. Okay, the function, the composite function f of g. Okay, so basically binabasa siya f composed with g, or in layman's term, f of g or fog. Okay, we write is as the following. So f of g of x just equal to f of g of x. Okay, the domain of f of g consists of numbers in the domain of g which lies in the domain of f. So note that kailangan mo nang isatisfy yung condition na para makuha natin yung domain. So ang i-check muna natin ay si g of x. So kailangan na kay g of x muna siya. Okay, nasa domain muna siya ni g of x. Okay, and then si g of x nung mga nasa domain ay nasa domain ni f. Okay, sige, let's look at an interpretation. Okay, so figure 1.27 illustrates function composition as a machine wherein we take an initial value g, and then pag pinasok natin siya kay g, we will get the output value g of x, and this g of x becomes the input value for f, which outputs f of g of x. Again, then similarly, we have here figure 1.28, which is an arrow diagram of f of g of x. Okay, wherein we take an element of the domain of g, okay, and then makukuha siya sa g of x, and then this g of x becomes the domain of f of g of x. Okay, so now to evaluate composite functions such as g of f, we first find, so pag binaliktad naman natin, no, we first find f of x and then find g of f of x. Okay, so the domain of g of f is just the set of numbers in x in the domain of f such that f of x lies in the domain of g. Okay, so basically binaliktad lang natin. So do take note that f of g is is different from g of f. Okay, it's not commutative. Okay, function composition is not commutative. Okay, so we have the following example. So suppose we have the square root of x and then g of x to be x plus 1. We need to find the following values. Okay, so a is f of g of x. So this is just basically pinasok lang natin si g of x kay f. So we get the square root of g of x is just equal to the square root of x plus 1. Okay, so the domain of this function is -1 up to positive infinity. Okay, sir, paano nangyari yun? Do take note that the domain of g of x, okay, so the domain of g of x is just equal to the set of all real numbers, or negative infinity to infinity. And then when we take the domain of f of x, we get 0 to positive infinity. Okay? Okay, so ano ba yung mga function values ni G? So, kailangan, di ba sabi natin kanina, magsisimula tayo muna kay G. Ano ba yung mga function values ni G na nasa domain ni f of x? Okay, so note that f of x starts with 0. So, kailan ba mag-0 si g of x? G of x will be equal to 0 whenever x is negative 1. So, the domain of f of g of x will start from -1 to infinity. Okay, similarly, ganito rin dito. So, we have g of f of x. So, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. Function composition is not commutative, okay? So, we get g of f of x to be equal to f of x plus 1, which is just the square root of x plus 1. And the domain of it is solely dependent on the square root of x, which is equal to 0 to positive infinity. And then we have function composition to itself. So, f of x is just equal to the square root of x, which is x raised to 1/4. And we know that the domain of x raised to 1/4 is just 0 to positive infinity. Then next, we have g of x, which is equal to x plus 2. Ang domain ng x plus 2 ay negative infinity to infinity. Okay? Okay, so ito yung in-explain ko lang rin kanina dun sa first part. Okay? So, take note that, so suppose that we have f of x equal to x squared and then g of x equal to the square root of x. Then we know that f of g of x is equal to the square root of x squared, which is pag sinimplify natin, makukuha lang natin ay x. Tama ba? Okay, which is equal to x. So, sir, di ba dapat ang domain kung x lang ay negative infinity to infinity? This doesn't happen when it comes to function composition. Kasi nga sabi natin, kailangan yung x natin nasa domain muna ni square root of x. Okay? And then yung mga function values ni g, okay? Ayun yung magiging domain ni f of x. So, dapat nasa domain muna siya ni g of x. So, since ang domain ng g of x natin ay square root of x, hindi negative infinity to infinity yung domain natin, kundi magiging 0 to positive infinity. Okay? Okay, now how do we shift the graph of a function? When we say shifting, either tinataas natin, binababa, minumove to the left, minumove to the right, and then there's even a case wherein we expand the function or we compress it. Okay, so how does this work? Okay, we do this by adding constants or multiplying constants to a functions. Okay, so depende kung saan natin ilalagay yung constant na yun, uh, depende kung paano magbabago yung function natin. So we have these formulas. So we have two kinds of shifting formulas, the vertical and then the horizontal shifts. Okay? When we say vertical shifts, minumove natin siya along the y-axis. So tinataas natin siya and then binababa. Okay, so here we add a constant k to the function or outside of the function. Okay, so we have y equal to f of x plus k. So, what happens is, if k is positive, tumataas yung graph natin. And then, if k is negative, bumababa yung function natin. Okay, so kabaliktaran naman yung nangyayari sa horizontal shift. Sa horizontal shift, minumove natin yung graph natin from left to right. Okay, so nag-a-add tayo dun sa loob ng function natin. So, we have f of x plus h. Okay, so, yeah. So, opposite naman yung nangyayari dito. Dito naman, pag nag-add tayo ng positive na h, nag-shift tayo to the left. Okay, and then pag nag-a-add tayo ng positive na h naman, okay, minumove natin siya to the right. Okay. Sorry. Pag nag-a-add tayo ng negative na h, minumove natin siya to the right. Okay? So, we have the following example. So, ang original function natin ay x squared. So, pag nag-add tayo ng x squared plus 1, tataas siya ng isang unit. Lahat ng points niya. And then, pag nag-add tayo ng 2 units naman. And then, opposite naman yung mangyayari pag nag-subtract tayo or nag-add tayo ng negative na number, yung graph ng function natin ay mag-shift below. Okay, so how about this one? So, we have the function y equals x squared. Okay, so pag nag-add tayo sa loob ng function mismo, for example, we get y equals x plus 3 squared. Okay, so nag-move yung graph natin 3 units to the left. And then, opposite yung nangyari pag nag-subtract tayo ng 2. Okay, so pag naglagay tayo ng negative 2 sa loob ng function natin, mag-shift yung graph natin 2 units to the left. Okay? And then another example here is the absolute value function. So subtracting 1 to the function shifts the graph 1 unit below the x-axis. And then since nag-add tayo na or naglagay tayo ng negative 2 sa loob, okay, nag-move tayo ng 2 units to the right. Okay, so bali dalawang shift yung ginawa natin dito. Okay, so meron tayong 2 units to the right and then 1 unit down. Okay, now we get to the scaling and reflecting a graph of a function. Okay, so how does this work? Pwede nating i-stretch or i-compress yung function natin. Okay, depende dun sa constant na i-multiply natin. Okay? And then reflections across the coordinate axis are special cases wherein yung c natin ay -1. Okay, so yeah, we have several cases. Okay, so first is when c is positive. So when c is positive and minultiply mo siya sa labas ng function, ang nangyayari ay nag-i-stretch yung graph natin vertically by a factor of c. Kasi nga, bawat function value natin ay mamumultiply dun sa c na yun. And since c is greater than 1, tataas yung function value natin. Okay, nagkakaroon tayo ng vertical na shift. Okay? And then, what if we multiply 1 over c naman? Ang nangyayari naman dito, since nagdi-divide tayo ng isang number na greater than 1, liliit yung function value natin, which causes the functions to compress vertically. Okay? And then, what if sa loob naman tayo mag-multiply ni c of x? Okay? Ang mangyayari, magko-compress yung graph natin. Okay? And then, kung nag-divide naman tayo sa loob ng function value, mag-i-stretch yung graph natin. Okay, what if c is equal to -1? So, when c is -1, the graph is reflected. If yung -1 minultiply natin sa labas ni f of x, ang mangyayari, nagkakaroon ng reflection about the x-axis. Pag sa loob naman natin siya nilagay, okay, nagre-reflect naman yung graph natin across the y-axis. So, we have the following example. So, again, ang example natin ay cy equals square of x. Okay? So, pag minultiply natin yung square root of x ng 3, makukuha natin ay 3 square root of x. So, ang nangyayari, yung graph natin, nag-stretch siya vertically. So, tumaas siya vertically. And then, pag ginawa naman natin 1/3, yung minultiply natin, nag-compress siya. So, bumaba yung graph natin. Okay? And then, here is an example naman of horizontal compression and expansion. Okay? So, nag-divide naman tayo ng 3 sa loob, no? Okay, so we have here the original graph, y equals 3 square root of x. So, pag nag-multiply tayo ng 3 sa loob, nagko-compress yung graph natin. So, may iksi siyang pag ganito. And then, pag y equals square root of x all over 3, nag-i-stretch naman yung function natin or nag-i-expand. Okay, how about reflection? So, again, ang square root of x. Pag nag-multiply tayo ng negative, magre-reflect lang siya about the x-axis. Okay, from blue magiging from the blue line, magmo-move siya to the red line. Okay, bakit anong nangyayari? Kasi meron tayong positive numbers dito. Pag minultiply mo siya ng -1, okay, then magiging negative lang siya. So, nagre-reflect lang talaga siya. And then, similarly, uh, pag sa loob naman tayo nag-multiply ng -1, magshi-shift siya. Or magre-reflect siya about the y-axis. Okay, so we have another example. So, suppose we have the function f of x equal to x raised to 4 minus 4x cubed plus 10. So, this is the graph of the functions. Okay, so what we want to do is two steps here. So, in letter A, we want to compress the graph horizontally by a factor of 2. And then, we reflect it across the y-axis. Okay, so how do we do that? Okay, so para i-compress yung graph natin horizontally, kailangan natin mag-multiply ng 2. Okay? 2 sa loob, no? Pero since kailangan na rin natin siyang i-reflect, magmumultiply tayo ng -1 sa loob din. Okay? So, all in all, kailangan natin mag-multiply ng -2. So, evaluating the function at f of -2x, we get -2x squared. 2x raised to 4 minus 4 times -2x raised to 3 plus 10. We get the following formula. Okay? We get 16x raised to 4 plus 32x cubed plus 10. Okay? So, this is how the graph looks like now. Okay? So, anong nangyari? Okay, parang nag-reflect siya about the y-axis, no? Kasi previously, nandito yung lowest point niya. And then, nung binaliktad natin, parang naging ganito na yung graph niya. Okay, and then sa B, kailangan naman natin siya i-compress. Vertically naman yung compression natin by a factor of 2. And then we reflect it across the x-axis. Okay, so we do this by, sa labas naman natin siya i-multiply. So, minus 1, -1/2 times f of x, we get -1/2 x raised to 4 plus 2x cubed minus 5. So, nag-reflect naman tayo with respect to the x-axis and then nag-compress tayo vertically. Okay? Okay. Okay, so actually sa calculus dito sa first part, ang ginagawa pa lang naman natin ay nagre-recall lang tayo ng basic properties ng functions. And one of the functions that will be used the most is the set of trigonometric functions. So familiar naman na kayo dito, no? So si sine, cosine, etc. Okay, so but before we go that, we will introduce a new method of measuring angles. Okay, so previously, ang ginagamit lang natin na pag-measure ng angles ay 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, etc. And now we will use what we call the radian measure. Okay, pag sinabi nating radian measure, we will measure angles in terms of pi. Okay, so pi here is now equal to 180 degrees. Okay, so kung i-convert natin yung 90 degrees, it is equal to pi over 2 radians. Okay, so parang gano'n. Okay, so where did this measure of radians come from? Okay, so take note of this formula. We will have S equals R theta. So S here is the arc length, and then R here is the radius of the circle. Okay, so now if you have a circle with radius 1, we usually call that as a unit circle. Okay, we can see that the central angle theta is will be measured in radians. Okay, it would just be the length of the arc kasi nga we have S equals R theta. So kung R natin ay 1, okay, magiging S equals theta lang din, wherein yung arc length natin ay equal lang rin sa angle. Okay, so take note that na nangyayari lang to pag meron tayong unit circle. So ito yung sinasabi kong conversion kanina. Okay, so 1 radian is equal to 52.3 degrees. And 1 degree is equal to pi all over 180, which is approximately 0.017 radians. Okay, so we have here the table of values for common angles. Okay, so we write it instead of pi we write it in pi instead of writing 3.14. Sobrang hassle kasi natin pag sinulat natin siya na 3.1416. Okay? So, we have 0 degrees is just equal to 0 radians. Then, as we move to the right, 30 degrees is pi over 6, 45 is pi over 4, etc. Okay? So, basta ang tatandaan nyo lang naman, ang pi radians ay equal kay 180 degrees. And then from this, pwede nyo na makompute yung ibang values dito. Okay? Okay. So, we have here a definition. An angle in the xy plane is said to be in standard position if yung vertex niya ay naglalay sa origin. The vertex is the point where the two rays connect. Okay? And then the angles are measured from counterclockwise from the positive x-axis. Okay? So this will be positive pag mineasure siya counterclockwise, and then the angles are considered to be negative pag mineasure natin siya clockwise. Okay? Okay, so take note that we can have angles pag that exist 2 pi, so that exist one full rotation, ano. And then similarly, ganun din pag pag nag-rotate naman tayo clockwise, we will have pwede tayong sumobra sa negative 2 pi, okay, pero negative values nga lang. Okay? So, again, meron tayong convention dito. So, from now on, hindi na tayo gagamit ng degrees unless I ask for it. So, ang common na measure na natin ng angles ay radians. Okay? Radians na, ano. Saka lang kayo gagamit ng degrees pag hiningi ko. Okay? Ayun na po. Okay, so introduce lang natin ulit yung 6 na basic trigonometric functions. I think familiar naman na kayo dito. Okay, so we have the sine, the cosine, tangent, cotangent, cosecant, and then the secant. Okay, so kung natatandaan nyo yung formula natin, if we have a right triangle, we can use the formula SOHCAHTOA. I don't know if naturo sa inyo to, no? Sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is equal to adjacent all over hypotenuse. And then tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent. Okay? Then, how do we get CST? Cosecant. Okay, so we have that cosecant is just equal to 1 over sine. So, basically, binaliktad lang natin to. And then, secant is equal to 1 over cosine. So, magiging hypotenuse all over adjacent. Okay, and then cotangent is equal to 1 all over tan. So, mababaliktad lang rin ulit. Magkakaroon tayo ng adjacent all over opposite side. Okay? Okay, and then another way of defining trigonometric functions is by the coordinate system, wherein the angle's terminal ray intersects the circle. Okay, so we have here the radius r, and then so instead of using this angle, okay, so etong angle na to, okay, pwede natin siyang i-define by 2 points, which is x and y. Okay, so actually x here is equal to cosine theta, and then y here is equal to sine theta. Okay, and then r here is just the radius of the circle. Okay, so may r pala dito, no? X is equal to r cos theta, and then y is equal to r sine theta, where r is the radius of the circle. Okay. Okay, so and then we have the following values. So we have sine theta is equal to, so you consider this figure, ano? Okay, so sine theta is equal to y over r, cosine is x over r, and then tangent is equal to y over x. Okay, so using this following identities, makukuha natin itong mga to. So tangent theta is equal to sine theta all over cosine theta. Secant theta is 1 over cos. Cotangent is 1 over tan theta. Cosecant theta is 1 all over. Nagre-recall lang naman tayo, no? I think that basically dapat na-discuss naman na to sa mga ano nyo, no? Sa algebra. Okay. Okay, so take note down na tan theta and secant theta are not defined whenever x equal to cos theta is equal to 0. Kasi nga nagdi-divide tayo ng cosine theta dito. So si tan at si secant hindi siya mag-exist at points where cosine theta is equal to 0. Kailan ba magsi-0 si cosine theta natin? Sa multiples of pi over 2. So whenever theta is equal to a multiple of pi over 2, hindi mag-exist yung function value ni tangent at saka ni secant. Okay, similarly, ganun din naman si cotangent theta at saka si cosecant theta is expressed as a quotient of a function divided by sin theta. Okay, so saan naman ba magsisiro si sin theta natin? Sa multiples of pi naman. Okay. Okay. Okay, so here we just have a way of memorizing the actual function values of the six trigonometric functions. Okay, using conventional angles such as, or hindi naman conventional, most commonly used angles such as pi over 4, pi over 6, and then pi over 3. Okay, so pag minemorize nyo itong triangle na to, pwede nyo nang ma-memorize yung function values. Actually, at this point in time, since second year na kayo, dapat alam nyo na to, no? Kabisado nyo na itong mga function value na to. So yes, you can indeed solve trigonometric functions without using calculators. Okay, and then we have here the ASTC rule. Okay, so ASTC rule, or as abbreviated, all students take calculus. Okay, so ano bang sinasabi ng ASTC rule na to? ASTC rule states, sinasabi niya kung aling functions yung positive sa isang quadrant. Okay? So sa quadrant A, lahat daw ng trigonometric function natin ay positive. So sa sa second quadrant, ang positive lang ay si sine. Sa third, si tangent. And then sa fourth ay si cosine. Okay? So, sir, paano po si cotangent, cosine, tapos si cosecant? Pwede nyo namang ma-determine yun gamit tong three basic functions natin. Ano? Kasi defined naman sila ng sine, tangent, at saka ni cosine. Okay, so consider natin to example na to. So, we have a degree na 2 pi over 3, and then unit circle tayo. So, ang radius natin ay 1. Okay, so our coordinates is, so x is equal to r cos theta. Since r yung r natin ay 1, we just have cosine 2 pi over 3 and then sin 2 pi over 3, which is equal to negative 1 half times the square root of 3. Or negative 1 half yung ordinate natin, and then square root of 3 over 2. Okay, so tama nga, no? So kung nasa quadrant 2 tayo, ang positive lang natin ay si sine, and then negative si cosine natin. Okay, so here we have the table of values for sine, cosine, and theta for most used values of theta. So ito yung mga multiples lang ni pi over 2 or multiples ni pi over 3. Okay? So, hindi nyo naman kailangan i-memorize to. Pero it's best if memorize nyo siya. Okay. Now we will discuss the periodicity and graphs of trigonometric functions. Okay, when we say periodicity, sige, define muna natin siya. A periodicity is the event wherein a function repeats its value at certain points. Okay? For example, this one, tan theta plus 2 pi is just equal to tan theta. Okay? Meaning the tangent function repeats for every 2 pi. Same goes with sine. Ang periodicity niya rin ay 2 pi. 2 pi. Okay? And then we call functions with periodicity as periodic functions. Okay? A function f of x is periodic. So ito yung main definition niya, no? If there is a positive number p such that f of x plus p is equal to f of x. Okay, the smallest such value of p is called the period of f. Okay, so note that smallest, no? Kasi ang tan theta plus 4 pi is equal to tan theta pa rin. Tan theta plus 6 pi is equal to tan theta pa rin. Okay? So ang kinukuha natin para makuha yung period ay yung smallest. Okay? And then here we have the list of most the common periods of trigonometric function. So, for tan and cotangent, ang period nila ay pi, and then the rest of the trigonometric functions, ang period na natin ay 2 pi. Okay? Okay, so let's take a look at the graphs of the trigonometric functions naman. So here we have the graph of y equal to cosine theta. Note that nagre-repeat nga yung function value natin whenever x is equal to a multiple of 2 pi. Okay, so the domain here is negative infinity to positive infinity, and it ranges from negative 1 to 1. Okay? And then take note that cosine is an even function. I think na-discuss naman na natin ito nung previously kung ano yung even at saka kung ano yung odd. And then similarly, we have y is equal to sine x. Ang period niya ay 2 pi. Okay, so na-shift lang siya ng 1 ng pi over 2 units to the right. Okay, and then here we have the graph of y equal to tangent x, and the graph repeats every pi. So meaning yung periodicity niya ay pi. Okay, so the domain excludes. So note that tangent theta is equal to sine all over cosine. So kung saan nagsisiro si cosine, doon walang function value si tangent. So tignan nyo to. Si cosine x ay magsisiro kay pi over 2. Walang function value si tan x kay pi over 2. So meron tayong asymptote at that point. Okay, and then here we have the graphs of the remaining functions. So secant, cosecant, and then cotangent. Okay? Yeah. So ganun lang rin ano. So secant is, so pag secant, meron tayong ina-avoid natin si pi over 2. Kasi take note that secant is equal to, again, 1 all over cosine. Tama? Yeah. Secant is equal to 1 all over cosine. So kung saan magsisiro si cosine, wala ring function value si secant. Again, similarly with cosecant, is equal to 1 over sine. So kung saan naman 0 si sine, dun naman walang function value si cosecant. Okay? Then here we have the graph of cotangent. Okay? So ang period ng secant ay 2 pi, cosecant 2 pi, ang cotangent ay pi. Okay? Next, we will discuss trigonometric identities. Okay, so take note that suppose we have here a unit circle. So x, sabi ko na to kanina, x is equal to r cosine theta, and then y is equal to r sine theta. Okay, so using the property, the Pythagorean theorem, we will get cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta is equal to 1. Okay, in-apply lang natin yung Pythagorean theorem pag itong radius natin or yung hypotenuse natin ay equal to 1. Okay, so this one holds for every angle theta. Okay? Okay. Okay, so when we divide this identity by cosine squared and sine squared, respectively, we will get the following identity. So, kaya na lang mag-divide, no? Magkakaroon tayo ng, for example, cosine squared all over cosine squared is 1. Sine squared divided by cosine squared is just tan squared. And 1 over cosine squared is just equal to secant squared. Okay, so we have an identity in terms of tangents and secants. Okay, and then here we have the addition formula. So, cosine ng a plus b, so meron tayong addition sa loob, is just equal to cosine A, cosine B minus sine A, sine B. Okay? So, we have, or pwede ako ina-abbreviate ko siya as cosine A plus B is just equal to cos, sin, sin. Okay? Pag sum naman ng sine, we have sin, cos, sin. Okay? So, take note that pag cosine, addition ng cosine sa loob ng function, nag-iiba yung sign, wherein sa pag sine ng A plus B, nare-retain natin yung sine. Okay? And then we have the double angle formula. So, cosine 2 theta is equal to cosine squared minus sine squared, etc. Okay? So, nagre-recall lang naman tayo ng mga identities na dapat ay alam nyo na. And then we have a special law of cosine. So, suppose that we know the length of two sides and one angle. Pwede natin mahanap yung third side, okay, using this formula. So, we have c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine theta. So, this is a property that is applicable maski hindi right triangle, ano. So, ito yung ating law of cosines. Usually kasi ang ginagamit lang natin ay Pythagorean or yung SOHCAHTOA, pero applicable lang siya pag right triangles. The law of cosines can be applied to any triangle. Okay? To any triangle, yeah. Okay, and then now we have two special inequalities. So, ito hindi na natin siya i-prove na, i-accept na lang natin. So sin theta is always less than or equal to the absolute value of theta, but greater than or equal to negative ng absolute value ni theta. And then we have another value for 1 minus cosine theta, which is less than or equal to the absolute value of theta, but greater than or equal to negative ng absolute value ni theta. Okay, so this one is, next is we shift, di ba nag-shift tayo ng graph ng mga polynomials, rational functions. Now, what we're going to do is to shift the graph of trigonometric functions. And how do we do that? Similar lang rin, ano? So, yeah, similar lang rin siya, no? Okay, so here it is dependent on, so kung nag-add tayo ng function sa loob, kung nag-multiply tayo ng function, or nag-add tayo sa labas, or nag-multiply tayo sa labas. Okay, so ganun din dito. Okay? So here we have a transformation rule that applies to the sine function. Okay? So si sine naman, gamit si sine, pwede rin natin makuha yung graph ni cosine, etc. Okay, so pag nag-multiply tayo ng A, ang ng A ng A, it becomes the amplitude of the graph, and then B, absolute value of B is the period, and C here is the horizontal shift, okay, and then D is the vertical shift, kung ilan yung itinaas natin vertical, okay. A graphical interpretation of the various terms is given in the following. Note that ito ay pag shift natin yung original na sine function, ano. Okay. Okay, so pwede natin baguhin yung taas ng sine function depende kung ano si A or yung minultiply natin. Pwede natin mabago si period depende kay B. Okay, and then yung C naman dito ay horizontal shift. So pwede natin siyang i-move from left to right depende sa value ni C. And then si D ay yung ating vertical shift. Okay, pwede natin itaas at saka si baba. Okay? So yun yung shifting ng trigonometric functions. Okay? I think that's it for our discussion, no? So Edna. And then again, isi-send ko sa inyo yung modules nyo, yung PDF later on, mga after 1 or 2 hours. Okay? So kindly leave comment sa video mismo, no? Okay, comment your name and then your section for attendance. Okay, and then I see you next week. Okay? Thank you.